Okay, here we are, the 13th of Teves, right? 13th of Teves. Hayom Yom. A one-liner, one punch. Where a lantern is set up, those who desire light gather round. For light attracts, brightness draws. As in Yiddish, Lichlichkeit zieht zu. Illumination draws people toward it. Or Lagoyim, right? That's us. The Or Lagoyim team. Tanya. I'm going to, usually we do on Friday and Shabbos. Shabbos begins the chapter on Beinoni, so I'm going to hold that for Sunday. And we'll do Sunday and Monday. On Sunday, we'll do Shabbos and Sunday, because I don't want to rush into the Beinoni, because that's the heart of the Tanya. So we'll take our time with that a little bit on Sunday. Meanwhile, you will have had the benefit of learning it at least once yourselves on Shabbos. Okay, so we have, until now, recently, I'm not going to start at the beginning of Tanya, but recently we have explored the tzaddik, the two levels of tzaddik. Tzaddik v'raloi and tzaddik v'tayvloi. And remember, harking back to chapter 1, the early, the Tanya's definition, the Alter Rebbe's definition of tzaddik. There are a few definitions of tzaddik, and I say, harking back to the early chapters, there's a tzaddik badin, the one who's righteous in judgment, who goes upstairs and the good deeds are weighed against the not so good deeds, and he's judged either tzaddik or Rosha, either righteous or not. But the tzaddik al pi Tanya is a human who has worked on himself or herself and has achieved or else has been given a gift as a result or after that work of being able to have zero consciousness, zero entrance into his or her consciousness of anything evil, zero. Now, what the difference between a tzaddik v'toivloi and a tzaddik v'raloi is a tzaddik who supposedly has some evil, not entered at all into his consciousness, but that tzaddik has completely mevatled it, pushed it to the side and separated himself or herself from it completely, so that it doesn't have any place in the conscious being of the person. Tzaddik v'raloi is there, but it's out, as I used to said a few times, off the table, off the field. The tzaddik v'toivloi goes one step further. Not only is it off the table, off the field, but the tzaddik v'toivloi has taken that and transformed it into good. And I mentioned, I said in yesterday's WhatsApp a little bit, that we should sometime have a conversation about what it means to transform darkness into light, badness into good. We all have tzaddik within us, amach kulam tzaddikim, and we all have a spark, at least some, that's available at least some of the time to be able to do this avoida also, transforming darkness into light. But we'll leave that aside for the moment. All right, so those are the two levels of tzaddik. Now the Alter Rebbe had told us there are 5 levels here: 2 tzaddik, 2 Rosha, and 1 Beinoni. So we need to, before we get to the Beinoni, let's talk about the 2 levels of Rosha, the 2 levels of evil people. So that's where we'll start today, chapter Yud Aleph. Page 30 in the classical Tanya, and page 160, in Lessons in Tanya. All right, this is a pasuk. God created everything one opposite the other. So we have Rosha v'Tayvloi, an evil person who has good to that person, And that's leumis, that's opposite tzaddik varaloi, right? So these two are opposite. An evil person who has good is opposite a tzaddik who has bad. So what does it mean? A Rosha v'toivloi, an evil person who has bad. An evil person who has good. Dahainu, meaning, shehatayv shebenafshay, this is a person where the goodness, which is in that person's soul, ha'elaki, in that godly soul, shebemoichai, in his brain, ubechalal hayamini, as we explained, the residence of the nefesh elakis is in the brain and in the right side of the heart. So where that goodness, that tzaddik, which is within that good which is in him, is kafuf ubatal legabe hara, is nullified, subservient, bent over. Kafuf really means bent over, nullified legabe hara mehaklipa. The goodness is subsumed and overshadowed by the evil, and we're going to see it based on to what degree is the goodness more predominant or the evil is more predominant. So we're going to focus first on the Rosha v'toivloi, where the goodness is predominant. So the goodness which is in his right heart is kafufu bata legabe hara, is nullified in relation to the evil which comes from the klippa shebechalal hasmali, which is in the left side of the heart. So this balance or imbalance or proportion of goodness to evil, evil to goodness, is also, just like in the tzaddik, divided into tens of thousands of different levels of the degree of which the goodness prevails or the opposite of goodness prevails. Many, many thousands of levels in regard to the nullification and the subservience of the good to the evil. As v'sholem. Yesh misha hafikas v'habitul. There is one kind of a person where the subservience and nullification of the good to the evil is ma'at mezer, only a little bit. V'haf gam zois in betamidos. And nevertheless, even though the good is most predominant, but the goodness isn't there all the time. It's not constantly present. The parakim keruvim, in every moment, one after another. It's there a lot, but only once in a while does the ra prevail. Misgaba hara ala toiv. And only once in a while does the ra koivesh esoir conquer the city. The city is the person, right? As we explained earlier, that in a person, not we explained, the Alter Rebbe said that, told us that in every person there's a battle going on between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. So when the evil is only showing its nastiness once in a while, so that's one level of a Rosha v'toivloi, where the good is more predominant. That's what this is describing right now. And the evil comes up only once in a while to conquer the city, which is the body, haguf. But the evil doesn't completely dominate the person. It only takes over the ra. The evil takes over only rarely. Lavad, she is sor lemeshmatoi, where the person listens only once in a while to the opinion, the shmaita. That's a Gemara word, the shmaita, the opinion of the Yetzirah, of the negativity of the evil. And only once in a while does the evil become the dominant engine of the person, the chariot of the person. Ulavush, and only once in a while does the evil become a garment, lihishlabish boy, that the person becomes enclosed in and dressed in this evil. And then we say garments, of course, that should tip us off that there are three garments of the soul: thought, speech, and deed. So in this level of Rosha v'toivloi, where the good is predominant, the evil is taking over one's thoughts, speech, and deed only once in a while. But it is taking over once in a while. Distinguished, of course, from the tzaddik, where there's no presence of it at all in the consciousness. And as we'll see in the Beinoni, where there is some rise into consciousness, and we'll see what the difference is, and keep this in mind, between the Rosha v'Toivloi, this kind of a person, where the evil is present and takes over even a little bit, okay, in one of the garments, thought, speech, and action, as we mentioned above. The Hainu, what are they? He puts them on the page. These thoughts, these garments are Meiser. It's once in a while, the person, the deed, exhibits some rishus, some of the negativity. Lasis averis kalis, and even then, the manifestation of it is only for a very light avera. V'lei chamuris, and not the big serious ones, chas v'shalom. Or in speech, right? We have that's action. Now we're moving up the chain in speech. Once in a while, b'diba levad, and it's only in speech. Sometimes it never comes into action, not even in a light avera, but it just takes over. Once in a while, a person's mouth could utter avak lashon hora, literally the dust of lashon hora, borderline lashon hora. And speaking for myself, this is something that happens almost every day in my life, particularly at work. When someone says something about a coworker or someone else, and the urge comes upon me, I'm just being frank, to engage in it. And I, hopefully most of the time, have to pull myself back, but I feel it. I feel the pull to, they were talking about somebody, well, let me give you my opinion. All right, but once in a while, it should be halavai, only once in a while. By the way, most human beings and most Jews are in this category of Rosha v'Toivloi. So don't get insulted if someone calls you a Rosha, because most of the time, most people have at least some thought of being attracted toward something or drawn towards something. Just like light illuminates, darkness also illuminates, right? Being attracted a little bit, at least some of the time, to the negative. At least the avak lashon hora, the dust, the borderline lashon hora, uvelitznes, or the border, or to engage in some scoffing of some other person, ugahagavna, or things like this. That's speech. Or in thought, it could be just in thought. The person, number one, doesn't even transgress even a light of error, never even gets crossed the borderline into lashon hora, and never really allows a thought to really take hold in his brain and progress. A huri avera, even thinking of an avera, a caution, and even thinking of, for instance, a very heavy avera. And even if the person's not thinking about it in order to do it, but it just comes into mind. He thinks about illicit relationship, even in his mind, even though the person isn't thinking of doing it in herself, it comes up in the person's mind. And in doing so, if one has a thought, even a thought, so we're going to have to be careful with the Beinoni, right? The Beinoni never has even a thought. So why isn't he a tzaddik? Right? We'll get to that, on Sunday, and we'll all get to it on Shabbos. So the person rises to thought, and when that happens, one happens to be oiver, transgresses what it says in Chumash Devorim, "Nishmartem kol dovara." You should guard yourself from every evil thing. This, the Alter Rebbe, is associated with even a thought of something negative. Shalei yaharba, as he says, you shouldn't muse about them. You shouldn't get involved in thinking about them at all. Or another aspect in which we're still applying the appellation of Rosha v'Toivloi, a person bad who has good to him. Person has an opportunity to be occupied in Torah. And he turns his or her brain and all of his energies away from that to something that's not Torah. Ketananda Abba says, we learn in the beginning parak in the first parakim of Pirkei Avos, Hanir Lalayla, right? The one who wakes up in the night and starts and thinking about other things. If you wake up in the night, you've got a choice. What are you going to do? You're going to sleep, walk around the house till you go back to sleep, or maybe you'll open up a sefer and take a look in the Torah. But you've got free time that you woke up in the night. It's an annoyance, right? But it's time that was given to you. So do something holy with it. Or he turns his heart the way he's thinking just about the physical beauty of something. But the physical beauty of something is a great opportunity to ponder the godliness which is underlying every physical beauty. But this person doesn't do that. He's just preoccupied, and we're just looking at the sunset. So this is a avak, dust, a trace, a borderline of a little bit of what's just, you have to be honest, it's not Kedusha. It's not sinning, there's no Avera that you're doing, but it's not Kedusha. So in any one of these situations, or anything like this, Nikra Rosha, the Esahu, one is called evil because one is not 100% aligned with Kedusha. So the other side, the Kedusha, is called Toiv, and the opposite of Kedusha is called evil. So I said, don't be insulted, because we're not, as you see very clear, we're not even talking about someone who's doing any sin whatsoever. It's just that the person is not all the time aligned with Kedusha. So at the time that he's not aligned with Kedusha, is called the Rosha, Be'esahi, in that time. The evil in one's soul, the propensity to be just a natural human being. This unaligned, not engaged in Kedusha, but just engaged in the natural way of living. So that's what's most powerful in the person, strengthening in the person. Is enclosed in the person's body. And ultimately could and possibly draw the person into actual sin, avera, and create impurity. And afterwards, the person gets drawn, but afterwards, the goodness prevails. This is a rush of a toivloi, right? This is a person who has natural inclinations and then brings them into holy inclinations. And then the good, the Kedusha prevails, shebenafsha in his soul, nafsha elikis in his godly soul. And the person has regret. And seeks forgiveness, from Hashem. Hashem yislach lo, Hashem will forgive him. That's the promise. If you return, he will be returned. If you return, he will return to you. As long as you do the shuva as prescribed by the advice of our Tzachamim, Zecharenim Lebrocha, B'shlosh Chaluchi Kapora, in terms of the three types of Kapora, Shehoy Rabbi Shmuel Doirish, which Rabbi Shmuel in Gemara Yuma spoke about three levels of tshuva, and Kamishakasa B'Macham Acher, and is written later, we'll get into this in the Geretz Tshuva. The three levels, just briefly. You could transgress a mitzvah's aseh, a positive mitzvah, like you were batal Torah, because we're now dealing with very refined things. And you make a decision to, and you have charata and regret, and make a decision to not mevatel Torah. I'm using just as an example, as a light mitzvah. You're immediately forgiven. And then there's, if you transgress any positive mitzvah and you make the decision and the movements toward tshuva, you're immediately forgiven. Then there are the negative mitzvahs, and there are two categories. One, which you may do the tshuva, but in order to get the kapora, the cleanliness, you need Yom Kippur. And then there's a third category of averas. You may do the tshuva, but in order to get the cleanliness, you may have to have some experience of suffering or pain or negativity that God brings upon you. So that's very briefly about this. We'll get into this in the Geras HaTshuva. Okay, so and so we're talking in the first place a Rosha v'Toivloi. This is number one person, and we've spoken about the person where the good prevails most of the time. Now, but there's you can go the sliding scale, where to be a Rosha v'toiva, you're a Rosha, and the evilness may be prevailing more of the time. There's a type of person where the evil is stronger. And a person is thinking thought, speech, and deed, 3 garments, are in the arena of Ra, Shel Ra. And that brings the person into sin and committing things which are more seriously negative. And this happens more of the time. In other words, the behavior is more disaligned, and it's happening more often. But in the middle, this is the Rosha v'toiva, actually, and there's goodness in this person, goodness revealed. So in between times, from being drawn over to the negative, the person has regret and has thoughts about tshuva from the part of good which is in his soul, which every once in a while prevails, the side of good. But it doesn't prevail, that side of good, to such an extent, to achieve victory over the evil, to separate him from the sin, completely. That he abandons it completely. And on this our sages have said, Roshoyim Moloyim Charotos. Evil people are full of regret. You may know people like this. I say that because I know people like this. And again, evil, we're not judging evil, a schlechter Mensch, a bad guy. No, we're not. It's just the state of the person is that the natural world is drawn, he or she's drawn into it. And the Kedusha, the whole arena of Kedusha, is somewhat present, but very little present. And these people are the people, this is Jewish guilt. This is, as he said, Roshoyim Maloyim Charotos. These are people who I feel bad about it. And not about kashrus, I don't even know about kashrus, but when I get into I'm just, role playing now, when one gets into a habit of negativity, the habit of things which are forbidden al pi Torah, it can evoke in the person and feel, I wish I could overcome that habit. I know that habit is destructive for me, and I have regret about it. So the Roshoyim are these Roshoyim who are drawn to that and are engaged in that, are filled of charotas, with regret. Shehem, and he says, the Alter Rebbe says, Shehem roiv harashoyim. This is the majority of Roshoyim. People who are, for some reason or another, have acquired habits which they themselves, I'm just using this, by the way, I want to make it clear, using this kind of a person as an example. A person who was just raised naturally, no problem, and then in an environment where people are doing stuff, and the person gets into doing stuff, whatever that stuff is, you can decide whatever you want to call that stuff, and the stuff, and that life, the person feels that it's not a good life, or even worse, that the person has indications that he's in control of the not good stuff is in control of that person, and the person wishes that it weren't that way, and then regrets that he got into it, but doesn't know any other way of being. So most people, to some degree of that, living the good life, living the natural life, but feeling a certain emptiness, that characterizes Roiv HaRashoyim, the majority of Rashoyim. Sheyesh b'chinas tei b'nafshim adayim, where the evil is shehem Roiv HaRashoyim sheyesh b'chinas tei b'nafshim adayim, but there still is, of course, goodness in their souls. They just haven't been able to touch it, to tap into it. Okay, that's Rosha v'toiva. Now we have the second, Rosha v'ra. We're going to stop here for a moment. Moving on to the next category. Anything you want to say about this or questions?
Yeah. If it says that these are the majority of the wicked, Like
Yeah.
I didn't understand. You were being a little bit vague. Are you talking when you were referring to the second category? Were you referring to people who aren't quote unquote from, or if or is the Alter Rebbe saying that the second category refers to even most Jews, including from Jews?
What do you mean the second? The Rosha B'Toivla, the evil who has good to him?
Yeah,
That
but there are
category?
two
Yeah.
categories, two subcategories. The first one, and then the second one that that
Oh, okay. No,
sins
I don't.
more often or in
Right.
all three garments. Like, and then the Alter Rebbe says this is the majority of the
Majority.
Rishayim.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that there's those two categories. There's one category that we explored so far. Rosha V'Toivla, a bad who has good to him. And there's a sliding scale on that scale. So on the sliding scale, the scale is about how much negativity is present and how much disalignment with Hashem is present and active, or how little is present and active. And this doesn't matter whether it's a frum Jew or it's a not frum Jew, right? I mean, if we want to go there, we know many frum Jews who have unfortunately fallen into some kind of behavior that we would call not good, whether it's, and I'll take an extreme case, abusing a child, whether it's having a bad habit, drugs, cigarettes, etc., and they're from. So this is not about being from or not from. It's
Right.
just about the degree in which the negativity is prevailing over the positivity.
And along this entire spectrum, though, this type of Rasha has remorse. Always.
Yeah.
There's always remorse.
Yeah, well, hopefully there's remorse. Someday, well, we're going to see now. Rosha Barala, there's no remorse. But yeah, there's at least a smidgen of remorse. I wish it weren't this way. If you talk, in my example of this of a frum person who falls into bad habits, which have negative effects on their own health or on their family life, etc., you'll find that in the Rosha B'Toivla, you'll find a point where the person says, will cry and say, I wish it weren't this way. I wish I could do something about this, but I don't know how to break this habit. Yeah. So there was
It
more.
seems to include even people, let's say, who speak Lashon Hara, not Avak Lashon
Yeah,
Hara, but
yeah,
Mamish
yeah.
Lashon Hara.
Absolutely.
Even that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm glad to clarify that.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. If not, then we'll move on to the Rosha Barala. What could be worse than what I just said, right? What could be worse than the kind of person I just described? We would call him in normal language a hypocrite. This person, he's dressed in a kapota and a strimal, but look at the behavior behind closed doors. So we call him a hypocrite, but he's not a hypocrite. He's a person who is toiv shebatoiv, essence of goodness, who has a godly soul, but hasn't been able to, or isn't knowledgeable of, for whatever reason, hasn't been able to utilize the power of the godly soul to overcome the draw of the animal soul and the Yetzer Hara.
Okay, and can I add something?
Yeah, yeah.
And to the extent that he does Torah mitzvahs, he's doing it just because it's Ratzon Hashem.
He could be. That's a darga. He could be doing it just because it's Ratzon Hashem.
Why is he doing it otherwise?
Hmm?
Because his neighbor.
Well, it's a scale. It's a scale. There are those who are doing it for that reason. There are those who are doing it because the person knows that leading a life like this is a better life. The person who are doing it because they have geschmack in the learning, they have geschmack in the avoida, they have spiritual needs which are being met by this. All kinds of reasons.
I think it's too strong to call him a hypocrite.
That's what I said. We in the outside world we call him a hypocrite. I hope. Maybe you didn't get my point. We don't use the language hypocrite in the Torah world because this is a scale. This is not being a hypocrite. This isn't a lie. He's not lying. He's not dressed up in a costume pretending that he's from. This is real. It's just that this person, as I've described this person, this Rosha v'Toiv, is drawn also as a draw into, could be serious misconducts, serious misbehaviors, causing destruction in a family on the deep end of the scale, or he could be drawn to very light things. He just has to have a cigarette once in a while.
Fair enough.
Okay. Okay. Now, one who has no regret, completely encased in evil, not even a touch of regret, remorse, or sadness about the fact that I can't break this habit of having one cigarette a day, or I can't break even these worse habits, which we're not going to talk about, which we did talk about, right? Person who doesn't have any regret at all, and a person never has thoughts, I wish I could change, I wish I were different. That's called Rosha v'Ral, an evil person who has evil. The evil in the person's soul, that alone is what remains within him. That is, remains in terms of, the nefesh elokis never goes away. In terms of the consciousness, what the person is conscious of is only evil. Ki govar kol kach, because the evil has raised its head and its strength to such an extent, ala toiv, over the good, so that the good is sort of pushed out of the picture, but it can never, ever be pushed out of the picture. So where is it? It's makif. It's hovering over the person. It's not being operative. This is the difference between makif and panimi, which we've, excuse me, sorry, which we either have if you're learning in other places, which I'm sure many of you are, the difference between makif and panimi. Panimi is the light that comes drawn into and has an effect and a specific effect. In other words, the or of Chokhmah, the light of Chokhmah has its effective receptacle is the brain. The light of the soul, which is the power of being of hergish and urine and excitement, is the heart. And those are faculties which come from the soul into us, but there are other levels of the soul, the other transcendent levels of the soul, identified mostly as high in the heat of the soul, which are there present, but they're not drawn in. They're makif, they're transcendent. They have an effect, they're there, and they're always ready to be activated because they're there all the time, but they're in what we call bechinas makif. The goodness is not bepanemius in this person's soul yet, but the goodness is in a state of makif, olav, hovering over the person, as it were, milamaila. That's a metaphor, hovering over the person from above. And it's important to understand that this metaphor needs to be understood. When we say it's hovering over the person from above, it doesn't mean that it's just like a cloud. If you imagine a cloud hovering over you, right? It's not hovering over from above, means that it's not being revealed and not drawn into panemius. It's there in presence in every aspect of you, but it isn't yet drawn into affecting your thought, speech, and deed. It hasn't been drawn into what's called koiches panemius, the inner powers. So as it were, it's there, but it's not touching you. It's not affecting you in an open way. So that's called makif olav milamayla, hovering over you from above. V'lachin, that's the good we're talking about. In this person, Rosha v'Ral, the nefesh elokis is there. That's the point of tzaddik, is always there. That's why I say he's not being a hypocrite. He just hasn't, or she hasn't yet been able to touch that level of makif and bring it down. V'lachin, Omer Razal, our sages have said, Kol be'asora shechinta shoria. It says, it's interesting here, another, I don't know if you call it a misprint or a lack of print. The quote is akol. He explains, kol be'asora, every group of 10. The actual quote from scripture is akol upon every person. And I'm not sure why that's not here, but it's not here. Maybe it's one of the Tikkunim, if we looked in the back of the book, would find this an expression. Why? But the point is, it's over. Over every group of 10 people, this is the power of a minyan, the Shekhinah dwells, but it's hovering over. So in a Rosha Barala, one who is 100%, imagine such a person, thank God, I don't think I know such a person, is all that's there in terms of consciousness, thought, speech, and action is evil. And the good is just hovering over. That's called a Rosha Barala. So with that, we have concluded, for the time being, our analysis of the 2 levels of tzaddik and the 2 levels of Rosha. And on Sunday, we'll get into the Beinoni. So any other questions of that part brought up?
Would you like me to read the takeaway in the Chayenu?
Well, not yet, but yes. But first I want them to see what takeaways each one of us have.
Okay.
Or any one of us. But I'll do the generally, because I think that's a good idea, that the takeaway in the, yeah. Does anybody want to step forth with a bachein? This is Tanya ubechein, right? So what? I'm looking. Anybody have a hand up? Well, I'll let you say the one in Chayim, but I'll say one for myself. That this is, I think Rivka or whoever was brought up, or a couple of you, this is a sliding scale. This is not a box that you're into. You're not identified. This is me, right? This is me for the moment. And you know what? I've learned here in Tanya that I have the power to move this scale from one side to another, from darkness into light, from Ra to Toiv, from pure animal, to even harnessing the animal. And that's what I want to know how to do that. And I'm going to try to do. That's my takeaway. What's the Chayenu's takeaway? Yehudas, or anybody?
Yeah. I would like to give my own takeaway
Sure.
too. I think it's humbling. It creates humility in a person to know that, to be aware of where they're holding, and to take a closer look at their behaviors and their thoughts, and to not be thrown off by the fact that you might still be a Rasha, but Tovo, you may not be a Beinoni yet, but it's obviously something to strive toward, but to not be thrown off by that label, and it just forces you to be real. That's my takeaway.
Right.
Okay, the Rishayim.
Okay, and you just have to say,
Rosha, and it's true, call him really for merely losing his life. That's it.
We didn't hear it. I didn't hear it because something about your connection is slowing everything down. Can you try one more time?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Now I can. Go ahead. What's the takeaway from Hainu?
Okay. There are many levels of Rishayim. One can be termed a Rasha for merely losing control in one area of his life. And he says in parentheses, a Rasha in its true definition, even if no one would call him one colloquially.
Right.
And then in brackets, this, however, should not cause him to be dejected.
Right. And it shouldn't cause him to be dejected because the person is able to change the name, change the game.
Right.
You can be a game changer. And that's it. All right, we'll say good Shabbos. Rivka, wait a minute. Rivka has a hand up. And then Akiva's want to say something. Rivka, go.
Okay.
Ari. Rivka, go ahead.
How do you put the hand up?
What?
How do you put the hand up before I say what I wanted to say?
Well, go ahead.
At the
since we got-
bottom under reactions, at the bottom of your screen.
Oh,
on-
okay. Okay,
Oh.
I'll figure that out. So I'll say what I wanted to say was there's a sliding scale, which means we can't have this whole idea of categorizing people as you're from, if you keep Shabbos and keep kosher, but you're allowed to say Lashon Hara once in a while and you're still in that, versus these other people that are not from. And that when you see it in that kind of a spectrum, you know, we're all in the same boat as we can't really say you earn the right to call yourself from and have a few Averis freebies, you know.
Got it. Good. Rivka, did you want to say before we sign off?
Sure, thank you. I just think it reminds us that we're constantly subject to change, and that there's always the good point to reach for, even no matter how far away you are, it's always
Yep.
there. And that's it. Not to judge yourself either so harshly.
Right. Good. Okay. Good Shabbos. See you Sunday, Yemir Hashem.
Good Shabbos. Thank you so much.
That's
Bye-bye.
shalom. Shalom. Huzzah.